The world is holding its breath tonight, because in just hours, a single decision could send shockwaves across global markets, trigger military escalation, and redefine the balance of power in one of the most volatile regions on Earth. But what's really happening behind this sudden blockade order? And why are experts warning this could spiral out of control faster than anyone expects? Here's what we know so far and why it matters more than you think. A dramatic announcement has surfaced. A blockade order attributed to Donald Trump targeting the Strait of Hormuz, set to take effect at 9 p.m. The claim, any vessel moving in or out of Iranian waters could be intercepted or stopped entirely. And not just there. Reports suggest this restriction could extend deep into the Indian Ocean, dramatically widening the scope of control. Now pause for a second. Because if this is enforced, we're not just talking about a regional move. We're talking about one of the most critical choke points in the global energy system being effectively shut down. But what does that really mean? The Strait of Hormuz is not just any waterway. It's the narrow passage through which nearly 20% of the world's oil supply flows every single day. Think about that. 1 out of every 5 barrels of oil on Earth passes through this corridor. And suddenly, traffic has reportedly dropped from around 135 ships per day to nearly 0. That's not a slowdown. That's a freeze. And when a system this critical freezes, the consequences ripple outward fast. But here's where things get even more intense. Iran has already issued a warning. Officials are calling this move a direct violation of any existing ceasefire arrangements and are signaling readiness for military retaliation. In other words, this is not just about ships and oil anymore. This could become a flashpoint. So the question becomes, is this a strategic pressure move or the beginning of something much bigger? Let's break it down. To understand the gravity of this situation, you need to understand leverage. Control over the Strait of Hormuz has always been one of the most powerful geopolitical tools in the Middle East. For decades, it has been both a lifeline and a vulnerability for Iran, for Gulf nations, and for global energy consumers. Now imagine that lifeline being cut. If Iranian oil exports are completely halted, the immediate effect would be a sharp contraction in supply. And markets hate uncertainty, but they panic when supply disappears. Oil prices wouldn't just rise. They could spike. And when oil spikes, everything else follows. Transportation costs go up. Manufacturing costs rise. Food prices climb. Inflation, already a global concern, could accelerate rapidly. But here's something most people don't immediately realize. The region that may feel this shock the hardest isn't necessarily the Middle East. It's Asia. Countries across Asia, China, India, Japan, South Korea are heavily dependent on Middle Eastern oil. For them, Hormuz isn't just a route. It's a lifeline. Any disruption there doesn't just mean higher costs. It threatens energy security at a national level. And when energy security is threatened, governments start making fast, sometimes unpredictable decisions. Now ask yourself this. What happens when multiple global powers start reacting at the same time? That's where things get complicated. Because this isn't happening in a vacuum. There are already tensions layered into this region. Historic rivalries, fragile agreements, and a delicate balance of deterrence. Any sudden move, especially one that disrupts global trade routes, risks tipping that balance. But what happened next is what has analysts most concerned. Reports suggest that this blockade is not just symbolic. It may involve enforcement measures, actual interception of ships. And that changes everything. Because enforcing a blockade isn't passive. It's active. It requires presence. It requires monitoring. And most importantly, it creates direct contact points between military forces. And history has shown us, when opposing forces come into close contact in high-tension environments, even a small miscalculation can escalate quickly. Now here's where we hit a turning point. Midway through this unfolding situation, a deeper concern is emerging, not just about oil, not just about Iran, but about the global system itself. Because if a major trade artery like Hormuz can be effectively shut down overnight, what does that say about the stability of global supply chains? For years, globalization has been built on the assumption that critical routes remain open. that goods, energy, and resources can flow freely. But this challenges that assumption. And when assumptions break, systems have to adapt. Fast. Markets are already reacting. Investors are watching closely. And behind the scenes, governments are likely preparing contingency plans, alternative routes, emergency reserves, strategic releases. But here's the twist. There are no perfect alternatives. You can reroute some shipments. You can tap into reserves. But you can't easily replace a choke point that handles such a massive share of global supply. So the pressure builds. And with pressure comes volatility. Now let's talk about the human side of this, because it often gets overlooked in geopolitical discussions. Rising oil prices don't just affect markets. They affect people. They affect families filling up their cars, businesses trying to stay afloat, economies already struggling with inflation. A sudden spike can ripple through daily life in ways that are immediate and tangible. And in regions already dealing with economic stress, this could amplify existing challenges. But here's the question that keeps coming up. Is this situation already out of control? Or is there still a path to de-escalation? That depends on what happens next. If enforcement remains limited, if diplomacy steps in, if back-channel negotiations begin, there may be a way to stabilize the situation. But if tensions continue to rise, if responses escalate, if retaliation becomes reality, then this could move from a high-stakes standoff to something far more serious. And that brings us to the most critical moment, the potential collapse of a recently achieved peace agreement. Because if Iran interprets this blockade as a breach of ceasefire terms, the entire framework holding the current calm together could unravel. And once that happens, rebuilding trust becomes exponentially harder. So we're standing at a crossroads. On one side, a strategic maneuver that could reshape energy, markets, and geopolitical leverage. On the other, the risk of escalation that could destabilize an already fragile region. And the clock is ticking, because the reported enforcement time, 9 p.m., isn't just a deadline. It's a trigger point, a moment when uncertainty turns into reality. So now I want to ask you something. Do you think this is a calculated move to apply pressure without crossing the line? Or are we witnessing the early stages of a much larger confrontation? Because the answer to that question may define not just the next few days, but the direction of global stability in the weeks and months ahead. And as always, the situation is evolving. Fast. Stay informed, stay aware, and most importantly, stay critical of the information you see. Because in moments like this, clarity is rare, and the truth often unfolds in layers. If you found this breakdown valuable, make sure to subscribe for more deep dive analysis on global events that shape our world, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think happens next? Because tonight, the world is watching.